So welcome to Feral Fry Up number 6. 2021 is here, and to kick off 2021, we have got Josie Jenkins, who's a Liverpool-based painter. Josie, do you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone.
Okay, so Josie's going to talk to us about her work for about, most of you know the format for this, so we'll talk about selected pieces of Josie's work right up to date until for about 40 minutes. And then, as usual, you'll have an opportunity to ask Josie any questions about her work. And we ask you to do that sort of in the last 20 minutes or so. And we'll ask you to do that via the chat function. So at about, I don't know, about 7:10 maybe, if you've got any questions about anything that Josie's spoken about, then please, we'll use the last 10-15 minutes to try and answer as many of those as possible. Of course, as usual, we've got Jane Jones on the phone. Say hello, Jane Jones on the phone.
Hello, everybody. Hello.
There's Jane Jones on the phones. She will be looking after all of your questions and passing them on to Josie. So Josie's joining us, like I said, from lovely Liverpool.
Yeah.
Although, Josie, you have got a little connection with the fair city of Hull, haven't you?
Yeah, my parents, well, I lived in Skidby all of my life up until I went to art school, and my parents are still there. And I lived down Ella Street in Hull for a few years after I came back as well. So yeah, and my fella, his family are from Hull, so we go back a lot, or we used to go back a lot before the time was before lockdown and all of the COVID stuff meant that you couldn't really do that. But yeah,
in days long gone,
yeah, it feels like a long time ago. Hopefully for not much longer.
Fingers crossed. And congratulations on your negative COVID test today.
Oh yeah. Had a lateral flow test today, I was telling Dom, and because I work in homeless services as well as being an artist. I do relief work and I've with various different organisations, so I work in all sorts of different projects, and so some you're likely to have more contact with people than others, but they do say that you should get a test every week, so that's what I've been doing. So yes.
Okay, so without further ado, shall we move on to the work? So
Yeah,
what I'm going to do now, everybody, I'll just bear with me, because between the slides there's a little bit of a delay sometimes as well, and I might have to come out of the slideshow in order to let people in. I'm going to carry on letting people in if anyone's running a bit late. I'm going to carry on letting them in till about 22, but I'm going to share screen. And we'll have a look at the first image. So, Josie, you sent me 7 different images.
yeah.
Sorry to admit someone. And they were kind of roughly chronological, weren't they? So this one goes back to 2012, does it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think I thought that they weren't chronological, and then I realized they are actually. It's just that when I suppose some of them are also the reasons that I put them in are to do with maybe telling you a bit about the way I make work and the things that I'm interested in, that I kind of group together sometimes in the way that I see it. So yeah, but they are chronological. So yeah, this is 2012, and it's a painting called Geograph Collage with paper clips, and I made it. I can't remember if it was the first collage. I think it wasn't the first collaged painting that I made, but it was one of the first. So when I say collaged, sort of have this idea in my head that the paintings are like collages. So they're not in that I don't stick anything on them. It's all paint, but the way I see it is like an assemblage.
Yeah.
And I'll take images from different places and put them together. And often, I think what I try to do, or I was trying to do at that time, is to find a way to bring images together that has some kind of sort of fantastical element to it. It's not, it's not quite straightforward. So you know that you're not looking at something real, but there's enough reality there with the, the illusion of figurative painting, for you to, as a viewer, for you to still kind of connect with it as something that could be possible, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What sort of scale is this one on?
Oh yeah, well that's the other thing. This is quite big. It's I think it's 160 in length. And that's the other thing that I think is quite important. Well, I suppose it's on different levels. I like working big, and I feel like it feels different when I'm making a big painting. But I think there's another level where if you're looking at a painting and it's of a size that maybe you could see yourself stepping into it, it then becomes quite real in a way that I think a smaller painting doesn't. So that's one of the other reasons I quite like working quite big. And I make I've tried making all sorts of different size paintings, but every time I've made a piece of work that I think this is one of my better pieces of work, it's always the big paintings. So keep going back to it. Yeah.
And so when you made this piece of work, you were in Liverpool there, you had a studio, and you were just starting to think about this kind of collage element to composition.
Yeah, I'd been making paintings of often of wastelands, and I would either spot something that I thought was interesting that I wanted to paint that had some kind of human element. There'd be a very natural landscape and then there'd be a human element to it, something ambiguous often. And I really like this idea of something ambiguous on the landscape that is human made, because some of the times I would say, oh well, it's because of the color, it's an unnatural color, and that's one of the reasons I started using fluorescent paint. So there's like a fluorescent pink in this painting, and I was already using fluorescent colors because I sort of, it was quite a conscious choice. I said to myself, that's the most unnatural thing, and if you want to have something that your attention is drawn to on a landscape, on a natural landscape, then using fluorescent is a great way. It kind of sparks you to go, that's not part of nature. So what is that? And then if it's something ambiguous, there's another level to it, the curiosity of what could be that thing. So I was already painting these landscapes, which I think that they're often quite flat. And I think that kind of goes back to, East Riding's quite flat. And I used to drive, and I went to Norwich School of Art. I used to drive through Lincolnshire and Norfolk, and it's just the whole way, the landscape, it's all completely flat. And I think that's really beautiful. The huge wide skies. Like, I know a lot of people are drawn to mountains, and I am as well. But there's something to be said for these big, huge skies and flat landscapes.
And it is like, because I think that's kind of, despite the fact that there's a pathway that recedes to offer some perspective in this particular piece of work, it is actually painted at quite flatly as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And there's some things that are really, so I suppose the sort of outbuilding thing that's in there, this is, it is actually painted quite quickly. I mean, if you see the real thing, it didn't take too much time, and you can tell by looking at it. I quite like the idea that there was some sort of variety in the way that I might paint something. So you know, some of the patterns can be quite detailed, or the brick wall a little bit more, and then other things just very kind of, the sky doesn't, you know, I don't take much time over it, I don't really labor over it. And I think often in my paintings some things are quite illustrative, you know, like the stones in the front, you could argue, well, they're not very photographic, they're actually quite illustrative, but I'm not sure if it matters too much if what I'm trying to say is tell you about, you know, something that can, if in your imagination you could think that you could stand in there and it's photographic enough, if the illusion is there enough, I think that's okay for me. And it has to be, because my patience is terrible. So
So was it a physical space that provoked a space that you encountered, or that provoked this piece of work, or is it kind of from imagination?
so I find it really hard to imagine anything. I find that I've always found it hard to imagine visual things, and things like, even like remembering people's faces and things like that. And I'm more of the sort of person that sees something and wants to represent it. But obviously what I don't want to do, well, not obviously, a lot of people like to do this, and that's fine. I'm not really one for copying a straight photograph of, you know, something outside, you know. So there's a website called Geograph, and it's like a sort of community database. It's like a community project online where people take photographs of every single square meter in the whole of the British Isles. So they're trying to document all of this, and people send in the photographs, and it's just a sharing thing. There's not really anything to it other than it's just a way to have a photograph of every single square meter. So it's such a great database for different images.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used that. I selected different images mostly from there, I think, for this.
Yeah.
I think the pages, I think it needs flipping forwards again.
Yeah, I'm just working out how to let someone in.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You might have to come off share screen to do it.
Okay. Okay, yeah, sorry about that.
That's all right.
So this is the next image. It should be coming up on people's screens. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. So this was when you were on a residency?
Yeah. Yeah. So the last painting that you saw, I won a prize for it called the New Lights Art Prize. I won one of the awards, and gave me the funding to go to China for a residency, which was really amazing. And yeah, it was just fantastic. I was interested in painting scrap. They did do, and probably still do, somewhat a lot of scrap recycling in China. And I'd seen a film by an artist, a photographer called Edward Batinsky, and I just thought the images, the things he was photographing, were just incredible. And I was particularly interested in, I'm interested in order. I'm interested in the repeat, seeing the same thing over and over again, and seeing many of the same thing. And I knew at the time that was true. I hadn't really known what it is I was trying to explain. I just say to myself, I like seeing many of something, or you know, I knew a repeat or pattern was part of it, but I think at that point I didn't understand that this had something to do with order, with the human sort of instinct, and it's a very human thing to like to see order, like to put things in order, relating to all sorts of psychological things. So yeah, I wanted to go to China partly because of seeing these photographs and maybe being able to see something that I was attracted to in terms of what I might want to paint. Also, I knew that I liked seeing human sort of intervention on the landscape. I knew that I liked seeing nature, but also seeing you know, things that people have done on the landscape, and this kind of interplay, and the two things interacting. And when I went to China, I don't know what I was thinking before I went. I just sort of thought I would have to go, I'll go to China and then I can go somewhere to find these things. And I didn't need to go anywhere to find these things, because that is China. That's everything there is like that. It's for someone who's interested in that kind of thing, it's like me, it's incredible. I mean, it's not to everyone's taste. You know, if you're a real nature lover, it's not necessarily the place to go, because there's stuff everywhere, and there's order and disorder everywhere, which is, you know, for me, I find that incredibly stimulating. So this is a painting of the Yangshan deep sea port, which is the largest container port it was at the time in the world. I don't know if it still is. And to get to it, you had to drive over the largest sea bridge in the world, the longest sea bridge in the world. And at that time, I didn't even know a sea bridge was a thing. I had no idea that there was such thing as a bridge over the sea. And yeah, so I one of the reasons I wanted to go there was because I'm interested in the idea of the emotions that wonder brings about in a person, which probably is connected to this order and disorder thing a little bit. And I just thought, you know, this place was just incredible. Just seeing all those containers, just a sea of containers, and there's another side to it where, you know, I have this sort of relationship with sort of the way I understand the environment and environmental issues, and how this kind of you know, the whole global consumerism sort of is making this happen, you know. And so there's a part of the whole thing that's a little bit uncomfortable, because it's not necessarily a good thing that all those containers are filled with tons of stuff that's probably going to end up getting binned at some point. But then there was another side of me that just marvels at, you know, what I'm seeing. So
yeah. So the thing that strikes me about this piece of work, we spoke about this before, is how the kind of more wet application of the paint is in contrast with the tighter, like the really fastidious painting of the cranes. And is that something that you kind of consciously set out to achieve, or
yeah, I would. This is the first time I started doing it, and I'm not sure how conscious it was, but I do think it has something to do with you know, when I was there, you can just buy all this amazing paper in China, the sort of paper that Chinese ink paintings are made on, and it's very, if you get the unsized paper, you can get huge pieces very, very cheap, and they absorb the paint or the ink or whatever you want to use on them, and it's like blotting paper, and you just get these beautiful it kind of does its own thing. So I was doing that a lot at the same time. I made some work on paper at the same time that was, you know, when you use ink or you use very wet paint, and it does its own thing and it has a life of its own. And I feel like if I'm going to categorize the painting, if I'm going to kind of categorize the elements in the painting similarly to the elements in the world, the bits where it drips is like nature. You know, the bit where you paint nature is like nature. The bits where the paint drips is like nature. And then the bits where I'm being very careful to paint something, either photographically or because it needs to have exact sort of precision for the order, for it to make sense, you know, for the lines to be straight, or, you know, the marks, you know, regular, this to me in the painting, it's there as structure, which is something, you know, humans like to see with this kind of variety composition, but it's also representing what's there out in the world that I like, you know, when I see structure and I also see nature.
Did you make a series of these, or is this a one-off?
I made two that I feel are similar while I
Mm.
was there, because at the time as well I was still making quite a lot. I think this is 2014. I was still making work where I felt like it all looked quite different. You know, I kept making lots of different things and I was a bit uncomfortable about that. I think artists historically have been uncomfortable about, you know, flipping around. I'm going to paint this and then I'm going to paint that, and then this anxiety that people will think that you don't have a clue what you're doing or you're not focused or something. And I actually think that in recent years, maybe in the last couple of years, I get the feeling that that's not so much of an issue now.
No.
It's kind of, I don't know why I feel this way. It might just be me, but I think it was maybe thought of in a bad, you know, you were thought I don't know, it was thought that you were you didn't really have an idea of what you were doing, or the work wasn't so valuable if you kept swapping from one thing to another. And I'm not so sure now if critics feel that way.
No, I'd agree. I think it's an interesting. I think it reflects on the culture that we live in, which is kind of a bit more fast-paced. Perhaps perhaps artists feel a little bit less inclined to focus on one thing for 10 years, or
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah.
maybe maybe it is that we're all impatient now. Yeah.
Having said that, impatiently moving on.
Moving on.
I actually didn't mean to move on. I just pressed the button and
Oh
that.
well, good time.
You want to go back to the other one, or
I
is that
don't
okay?
I don't think so. And if there's any questions, people can put them in the chat.
Yeah. So that last piece was called Container Island,
Mm-hmm.
wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2015. I've got for that.
Yeah, right. That's when it's like, when did I go? Yeah, oh yeah, 2015. Yeah, because I finished it just at the end. That's right. I was there from 2014 through for 3 months. Yeah.
So this is quite a contrast, really, when you consider what we've just seen. That there's obviously elements of juxtaposition and that are still prevalent in this piece of work, but it's quite contrasting to the last one. So this is called Willow Pattern Stories. Is that right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. It's a part of a
2017.
series called Willow Pattern Stories, and I think I called this one Rewrite History. I think they all had different titles, and yeah, it was. So I wanted to paint an interior, and it was sort of project based, this one, in the sense that I'd been invited to exhibit in a kind of a one-off show in a warehouse where you could show huge work. And you know, in Liverpool there's nowhere to show huge work. We don't have any big galleries where you can, I mean, you know, obviously we have the public art galleries, but for studio shows and, you know, sort of grassroots type stuff, you only get like small spaces. So this was such an opportunity to make some big work and show it. So I made 4 paintings. This is also quite big. I think the height is 2 meters. So, and I wanted to paint an interior. It was actually responding to very loosely to some photographs of a plasterer plastering a toilet. It looks nothing like that now, but you can see the bathroom. So I was plastering a small bathroom, so you can see the bathroom light at the top, and some of the other paintings had the tiny bathroom window, in which I like the way that it was a bit awkward. I like awkwardness in paintings, putting things in that are, you know, you've got an idea of what it is, but you might sort of be a bit unsure about why that doesn't, you know, something that doesn't quite fit or something like that.
What was it that made you shift from having painted sort of outdoor spaces to focus
So
on interiors for a
you
while?
know what? I don't know, but I think you said this to me the other day, and I was like thinking about it, and someone said it to me, and I was thinking it's really funny because I remember at the time I wanted to make a painting like Raffi Kalandarian, I don't know if you know his work, but he makes these interiors, and that's just funny because this is nothing like. I think I'll see an artist's work and I'll be like, I'd love to make a painting like that. And when I say like that, I mean there's certain elements in it that attract me. It might not be that I wanted the painting to look like their painting, but I'll be like, that bit, I'm attracted to that, I'm attracted to that. I could make a painting that has those things, those elements to inspire me. And he does pattern, painted quite loosely. He doesn't really he doesn't try too hard to make it photographic, but because of the space, the illusion in the space, there's enough there. I think if you want to draw people in with an illusion, you can use perspective.
Yeah.
And that can be enough, actually. A lot of people say to me when they see these paintings for real, they say, I don't think it's a backhanded compliment. I think it's a compliment. I hope, but they often say, it's not painted very accurately, is it? I thought it would be, painted more accurately, or maybe they would say more photographic, or when you go up to the painting, it's not,
People are surprised by the rustic quality of
yeah.
painting, aren't they? Because we more often than not we've consumed the image via a replication of the image, maybe in a book or something,
Yeah,
or on a computer,
online or in a book,
yeah.
exactly, and it flattens it, and yeah.
So
So
how would you working on this composition similar to the process of piecing things together in the first image?
so it started to change. So the very first image, I made it up. I drew it by hand first, and then used that to make the painting and used photographic references. The second one I did I didn't do it in Photoshop because I think at that point I didn't really know how to use Photoshop, but I did it in some kind of program where I pieced some different images from the container port together. And in this one, I made a paper collage. I printed things out and I cut them out and I put them together in lots and lots of different compositions, and then I took photos until I found one that out of all of them, that I was happy with, that I wanted to make it into a big painting. So I wanted it also to feel like it was the paper collage, but it's funny because I find it quite hard to then get that. I tighten up again, when it goes onto canvas, suddenly it's not so easy to keep it loose.
Do you still find like a blank canvas to be quite a quite something to be revered and respected?
Yeah, not even, I mean, I'm not even one of those people that spends a long time perfecting their canvases. I know some people who'll rabbit skin glue and millions of layers of, primer and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not even one of those, but I still find it really hard, especially with these, because there were bits where if you made a mistake, that's permanent. And then so the background that you can see that's a cream color, that's just raw canvas. And I really like working onto that just as it is in certain places, but with the plant, if I mess something up, you can't then paint over that. It was quite a bit stressful, to be honest. Yeah.
I think this one leads quite nicely into the next image. Should we move on?
Yeah, that's fine. So this one, I wanted to include it because it tells you a little bit about how the process, and also how I see it in my head, like the way I sort of think about building an image up. I started to wonder if I could use print to get the really kind of tight bits that I needed to get, and the bits of perspective that were needed to be exact to make it really work. And so I started experimenting with some smaller work where I would do transfer printing. I was calling it monoprinting at the time. I think I didn't really know how to describe it. And my friend said to me recently, that's transfer printing. You mean transfer printing? And what he meant was or what I mean is you take a piece of paper and you roll your oil or water-based, but I use oil-based printing ink onto the back of it, and then you draw with a pencil or some other harder object on the other side, and whatever you draw comes through onto the paper and it's the sort of thing a lot of artists will have done in the earlier years, maybe experimenting, and it's a really lovely thing to do, getting that print. There's some kind of element to it that I always try to analyze. Why is it that that's nicer than just doing a drawing? Why is it that if I draw through, that's a nicer thing? And I'm never quite sure. I wonder if it has something to do with it being having an extra kind of, it's almost like it's being seen through a screen. It's got an extra filter to it. It's like having an extra filter to it or something. So I made this. This is a work on paper. It's also quite big. Maybe it's A1 size or something like that. I think the paper was A1. And I made it by transfer printing certain things on, painting over other bits and layering it up in that sort of way. So, and this is the way that I would build up a painting as well. So I'll take the background, sort of just the layout of the room, which has been transfer printed. It's just been drawn in that way, you can see. And I'm literally just taking a photograph and tracing the lines to draw that in. And then the other things in the room will then get kind of collaged on. I call it collaged, but what I've done is I've drawn around the object. I've cut the object out in paper. I've drawn around it. I've painted that with acrylic paint, and then done a transfer print onto it to show me exactly where I need to paint, and then I've painted that in. So it's this kind of combination of print and painting that a printmaker would probably laugh at, because there's probably a much easier way to do what I'm doing. But I don't know, there's something about the end result that I think looks a bit more handmade than a straight sort of etching.
So it's kind of collage in the sense of it's an aggregate of separate images coming together, but it's not applying different images by sticking them on necessarily.
Yeah, that's it. That's sort of the way I see it. And the original image was actually another sort of project-based work. It was in response to a house in on Anglesey that another artist has taken on to try and renovate it and make it into a residency space and event space, and place where the artists would live. And so I think this picture's called the things I found in the house, or I think I've called it that. Yeah, the things we found in the house. And so these were all things that were in different rooms, and I've brought them in and scaled them up or down. And the flooring is just a piece of the flooring from one of the bathrooms, and the boy is huge. It's not really that big in real life. I just made it really huge. So it's still sort of meant to have that kind of strange, what are these things? I do. What are they? What are they doing? And why is that a bit big? And what are the chandeliers, doing, and that sort of thing.
Lovely. Yeah, that's great. So are you still using that methodology in some of the work you're doing now?
Yeah, I've actually gone back to it. I was doing some today, actually. I've gone back to it because I had these other really small ones that I did that were part of the Willow Pattern Stories series. So they also had bits of willow pattern in them. I posted them on Instagram and got a million messages of people saying, "Oh, do you sell those?" And I was like, "Oh God," because they take so long to make. And I don't really want, I've only got 3. So I've actually thought, you know what, there's ways I can make them more quickly. And some people, I think there's a couple of people who'd really like some. So I've gone back to it. Yeah, at the moment.
Should we move on to the next?
Yeah, that's fine. So I wanted to include this one because there's two different ways that I work. All the stuff that we've spoke about before is something that I'd see it as assembling or collaging, or however you might describe it. But this one I call a found arrangement. So a lot of the things that I like to paint are things that I've just found, and I'll take one photograph, and it's like, I feel like it's a setup. I feel like the thing that I'm looking at is exactly everything that I love, that makes a great composition, that I know is something that people are drawn to. And in the collages, I was fabricating that. I had an idea of what people like to, what engages people visually. And I was sort of fabricating that, and it's become more and more contrived. I read a book called The Sense of Order by Gombrich, who also wrote The Story of Art. I think that's the most famous book that people know about. And it's about the psychology of decorative art, and basically explaining to you why it is that you're attracted to some things. That was the moment that I knew that when I was talking about many, I was talking about repeat, I was talking about order. And Gombrich explains about sort of how our brain works, and how why we're interested in order, but also why we're interested in disorder, and why we like this beautiful combination of the two, and why we like to see, something on the landscape that might be something interesting to us as humans, something that relates to survival, and also spreading our genes. So I at this point I'd really started to understand what I was looking for exactly, and also started to be able to make that up. But this is actually so I used a photograph that I took in China, and when I was in China at the time, I didn't know that I was going to start painting these sorts of compositions, and then I was quite annoyed that I didn't take more photos of things like this. It was just a random one that I'd taken. I was interested in container yards. So this is, as you know, this is another container yard. This one's in Xiamen, which is the place that I stayed in China. And their container yard is huge compared with our container yards, but it's nothing in China. It's like they think that's a small container yard. So I took this picture because it has the fence. Or rather, I decided to use this picture. The elements that are so great about it are the fence in the side has an element of looking through. So looking through is a great way to bring depth to a painting. It's got structure. It's got that kind of weird, it's like a container. I think it's like the thing that the crane comes off or something like that in the background. And then obviously it's got that tower thing, this sort of so there's structure. There's a bit of ambiguity to that, because I don't think we all really know what that's for. We just know it's some kind of structure. We couldn't tell you exactly what. There's nature. So you've got the green bit, which I've exaggerated purposefully by just painting it as sort of loosely. That's the greenery in the background, and then beautiful bit of order where there's the concrete blocks that have just been stacked up, and then the what I call security bunting that's going across. So in China, if you want to tell someone to watch out and not stand on, something, you want to draw attention to the fact that you've just put a pile of concrete on the floor, you use bunting instead of, I don't know, this is it's just it's everywhere in China, and obviously they don't call it bunting. I don't know what Chinese people, I have to ask. I've got a Chinese teacher because I learn the language, and I'll have to ask her what she would call it, find its Chinese name. But I call it bunting because I think it's funny, and I think there's quite a bit of humor in my work generally, especially now. So then that is the element of ambiguity as well. You look at that and you think, that's odd. It's even better that it's the truth.
Yeah, exactly. Because having seen, say, for example, your first image where the paper clips are sort of inserted by your own contrivance, I initially, when I saw this image, I thought that was a similar a similar motif that was kind of coming on.
Yeah.
You were inserting it to add that extra bit of intrigue, but that's really interesting to realise that in China they use bunting to create a sort of sense of hazard.
Yeah. And my favorite joke about the bunting in China is that there'll be like, you know, some bits of roadwork stuff, and there'll be some bunting to tell you to, you know, not hurt yourself and trip on it. And then next to it will be a huge gaping hole that's like miles bigger and more dangerous than anything, and there's no bunting over that. This is the disorder of China.
I wonder if at birthday parties they use like Belisha beacons and fluorescent cones.
Yeah, they'll have like hazard tape at birthday. I'll ask my Chinese teacher. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got about 15 minutes left. So anyone thinking about asking Josie a question, if you can start thinking about maybe typing that into the comments section. We got 2 more slides to go through, Josie, haven't we? So
Yeah, I
we'll
think
move
so.
on to the next one.
Yes. So this painting is another found arrangement, and I've called it after. I made it quite recently, actually. Maybe it wasn't. It's probably a year ago, but I think of everything as recent because I don't make tons of work, and because last year was a very strange year. So it's called After Hervin Anderson with Cones and Wasteland. I've Before I made this one, I've named other paintings after other artists that have either it's where the composition has inspired me. So I've made some after Thomas Cole paintings. He was like a romantic painter in the 1800s, American. And the next slide that I'm going to show you is an after Turner, but those ones are assembled ones, whereas this one is a found arrangement. But I feel like one of the reasons I connected with it was partly because I'd seen this painting by Hervin Anderson. I don't know if everyone knows who he is. He was in the Turner Prize, and it was actually the one that was at the Ferrens. So you may have even seen his work, but the painting that I'm talking about, it wasn't in that exhibition. And it's called, I looked it up, I was saying to Dom, I can't remember the title. I was like, it's got chicken wire in it. It's actually called Chicken Wire. It's called something Chicken Wire. I looked it up. Where is it?
Yeah, I think most people watching tonight should maybe know or have maybe seen his work
They
before.
might, yeah, they should have done. So it's called Country Club Chicken Wire. And so the composition, I mean, everything in that painting of his, I just think it's the most beautiful painting. And you can analyze, because this is what I do. Unfortunately, I destroy the magic. I like to analyze why it's so beautiful. And this painting of his has tennis, it's like a tennis court in the background. So you've got, you know, your kind of the symbols that are drawn onto the ground, you know, the sort of tennis court area, and then it's got some natural, you know, bits of greenery in the background. It's got some uprights like that help with the whole composition, and then you're looking through a chicken wire fence towards this sort of setup, and it's just absolutely beautiful. You can Google it. If you just Google chicken wire and Hervin Anderson, it'll come up. And so I felt like there was a lot of similarities with this composition that I'd found and that one that he'd found. And there's another one that I'm working on at the moment that I'm calling them like looking through paintings. The idea of looking, I've mentioned it before, looking through something to other layers. It's just another great way of working with composition to create illusion or you know, another way of creating a depth. And the other thing that I've sort of tried to do with it, so obviously this doesn't look exactly like the photograph, but I've tried to be quite loose with the sort of natural stuff with the wasteland in the background, and then the sort of elements in the front are probably as photographic as I get. I don't get too photographic, but that's probably about as good as it gets.
Is this acrylic or is it oils you're using?
I've used both, and I've started doing that partly because it's, you know, obviously because acrylic dries quicker, but also I was using acrylic ink quite a lot to get the nice sort of the bits where the paint does its own thing, you know, where it runs and blobs, and you know, you're less in control of it. So you can use acrylic if you water it down. It behave quite similarly to acrylic ink, and I can't remember with this one whether I was using the ink or the actual paint. I think I was using the paint. So I like acrylic a lot. I just don't like it when you're trying to use it in the way that you would use oils. You know, if you're using it in a loose way, I quite like it. So I used acrylic for the background and then oil on top, because I just prefer, if I'm painting photographically, I do prefer using oils, but I find it a little bit difficult with the just in my studio there's not much ventilation, and I react to it a little bit. So kind of through the years I've started to use it less, but I'll never stop entirely, because there's just something about oil paint that I really like compared with, you know, using. So
it's not the same. It's not the same. Okay, so just a reminder, if anyone has got any questions, just to type those, put them through the chat. We'll just move on to, let me just work out, I've got to stop the share, I think. So we've got one more image, haven't we, Josie?
Yeah, there's one more at the end here.
It's letting me go backwards, but not forward. So there you go. Josie's got a website, as you can see.
That's really strange. Even if you press spacebar, does it not move forwards?
Yeah.
Oh, that's weird.
Bear with me. Jane, if we've got any questions while I'm working this out, maybe Jane Jones on the phones is just going to read out one of the questions we've got while I carry on.
That's fine. I should also say, no question is a stupid question. If I don't know, when I'm on it, like listening to an artist talk, and I think, what if I say something stupid? And I just hate the idea that anyone might think that, and I'm not really very easily offended, so
don't say that, Josie.
So really
I know this audience better than you.
What have I said? So yeah, you know, don't be shy.
Okay. Right, well, I've worked it out, so we're good to look at the last image now.
Great.
Okay, so this is your final image.
Yeah.
Is this 2020 as well?
Yeah, this is this year finally. Actually, made the other one I made right at the beginning of this. I finished at the beginning of this year, but this one's yeah, the one thing I did this year.
After Turner.
Yeah, it was using composition by Turner. Actually, I'd already started painting Turner's or using or referencing Turner's rainbow paintings. And if you know Turner's work very well, he does he's made quite a few paintings with rainbows in them, which I think I kind of like. I like rainbows because they're symbolic. A lot of the work that I've just shown you, some of it has things in it that are symbolic, and some of it I just pick things just for composition reasons. And I've not really spoken much about the symbolism. It's just, I suppose there's just not enough time to talk about everything, is there? But but yes, some things in there do actually have meaning to me. I wouldn't necessarily expect anyone else to, be able to know the meaning necessarily. You could maybe, sometimes it's more obvious than others. And with rainbows, I mean, the symbolic nature of rainbows is really quite obvious. I do like obvious symbols, but they're a little bit cheesy as well. I find them quite I think it's quite amusing that, I mean, when Turner painted very romantic landscapes, I think those kind of things, we were allowed to sort of look at something that's blatantly like very contrived in a way, in a sense. They were quite natural, but also just so dramatic, something that's so dramatic. At the moment you almost apologize for being attracted to something that has those classic elements to it, like you're not in control of your stupid emotions or something. But I just think it's great. I think it's fine if you're attracted to something like that. And I have no problem with rainbows. So
That's good to hear. I think the rainbow's maybe been co-opted or corrupted by popular culture.
yeah, and you know what, there's a lot of it I don't mind either. Like, obviously it's like a symbol of gay rights and that kind of thing, and then it's been used even in a kind of retro indie context. It's almost like a social signal. If you wear a rainbow, it can mean all these different things. And I love all of that. I love things that have more meaning than one. I love symbols that could be one thing, it could be another thing. I don't really mind if people don't see it the way that I saw it when I painted it.
When you were putting the image together, when did the rainbow go in kind of early on, or was it one of the last things?
Yeah, well, it was a bit annoying actually. So I made the painting, I made the background using acrylic inks, and it's very loose, and the rainbow was not beautiful. The curve on it was not right. It was doing something really annoying, and I knew that it wasn't beautiful enough. But I sort of went along with it, and I thought, oh, it's okay, that's fine, it'll be all right. And then started painting the other elements on top, which I did in the sort of collagey way. These are pieces of Lego, and the wind turbines was kind of the bits that I saw as being collaged on top, if you see it that way. And then halfway through, when I'd painted the Lego at the bottom, I realized the rainbow was wrong, and I needed to fix it. And the problem is that you can't really fix I painted straight onto canvas. I've been doing this since I've been making paintings sometimes where I take a stop motion of it, and I don't want to wait for the acrylic to dry behind. And I quite like using ink directly onto canvas without having to prime it first. You get a different it's just different, the way it works. So I then realized I'd messed it up, and so I had to fix it. And actually, I think I kind of preferred it. So the rainbow does sort of drip onto the pieces of Lego at the bottom a little bit, which I then had to bring back. But I was glad overall that I mean, it was a bit of a risk because I could have just completely messed it up to the point of no return. So I was quite lucky. There was a point with this painting where I thought, I've worked on this for months and it's going to go in the bin eventually. And it's a big painting, so I find that really, really annoying if that ever happens. I find it quite depressing if I've spent ages on something, and which I'd prefer to be better at, because you learn so much more from making mistakes, don't you? But yeah.
So they say, yeah.
So yeah, I
Lovely.
made.
Okay. Well,
Oh yeah, go on.
Jones on the phone. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was only going to say, with the rainbow thing, I was doing these rainbow things, and then COVID, and suddenly the rainbow became a symbol again. And I really quite like that, so it's funny, I didn't actually paint the rainbow to reference COVID, but as this was happening, it was just a thing that connected with it straight away. And yeah, it was quite, so it was a sad time, with the whole and lockdown and all of that. But then I have quite happy memories of this painting, actually. I feel like it's quite a happy painting. A lot of my work can be sort of people see it as dystopian, and hopefully I don't think this one is quite as dystopian.
I can see where they're coming from. I mean, I don't think I've ever thought of your work in that way, but I can see where people are coming from in the sense that with this particular piece, maybe it's to do with the colour, but it feels like there's not the detritus. There's no
Yeah.
detritus there. Things are very are placed.
Yeah.
So I think we've got some questions for you, Josie.
Yeah,
So
that's fine.
Jane Jones on the phones.
Yeah, Josie, I don't know if you can hear me. Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, there's a question from Paul Collinson. He's saying the images have a certain muted colour use that reminds him of English surrealism, and he was saying about where you don't render, you have bare canvas on the interiors, so the interior becomes exterior, and then with the exterior landscapes, there doesn't appear to be a focus, but like a relying on like a looking through the entire landscape. And he's asking, is the colour palette a conscious decision, or is it something that emerges from the materials and processes?
Yeah, I think I thought about my colour palette quite a bit previously, because I don't know if I still do it, and I probably do. I've not thought about it recently, but I know for a fact that previously I started using a limited colour palette because I wasn't good with colour, because I just found it was already difficult to think about all the things you had to do to make a painting, and then also having to think about colour. And I'd never done, much colour theory. I wasn't able to kind of consciously work it out. And I just didn't, and I knew that it wasn't like my forte. So I would use, and I think I still do use similar colours, like certain colours, to make any painting. Yeah, and especially I suppose the landscapes as well. I mean, green is a bit of it. I often don't use green on a landscape, even though I try to tone it down, because green's quite a difficult color to use, I think, as well. So yeah, that I would say that was a conscious decision. But with what Paul was saying about the canvas coming through, this is also quite conscious in the sense that I like the idea that someone will see the painting, and see that there's and feel the illusion, be swept up in the illusion that it is a real thing or a real place, but at the same time know that it's a painting. To be able to have your brain kind of flipping between the two, I quite like that idea. So yeah, I quite like leaving the raw canvas partly for that reason, and also partly because I do like keeping things loose as much as I can, because I know that there'll be some things that I will not be able to help myself from getting obsessed with. So there's some rules about keeping certain things loose.
Yeah.
Stops me getting obsessed with the whole painting.
Yeah.
Okay,
any more?
Thanks. Yeah. Tanya's asking, have you tried the water-based oil paint?
Yes, I have. I tried them partly because I told you I react to the oils, which is becoming more of a problem the older that I get, with my skin. And in China, I think I developed a throat problem in China because I used some terps. It was really dodgy, and then these crazy kind of weird mutated wasps were flying into my studio, and I was scaring me, so I shut the doors. I shut the doors and the windows, and then I think the whole thing was just really bad fumes, and ever since then I've had a bit of a throat problem, and I think it might be because of that, but who knows, it could be anything. Anyway, so I think these water-based oil paints are really good. I've got a friend who makes the most amazing paintings, and he uses them, big paintings. I've only used them for small ones. I think they're very practical. I've had problems with the white drying, with it it's like it never dries. I don't know if it was the make that I used. I can't remember which make I used, but yeah, and I just haven't used them recently, but I would use them again, because I think they're all right, really. Just a bit of a weird concept.
Yeah. I think that, I mean, from my narrow experience with them, that they smell completely different, don't they? I like
They don't smell at all, or yeah, they're very strange, really.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that I feel like what's good, they do behave like oils, I think. And I think I started using them when I made some work at home. Because you don't always want oil paint. I mean, oil just gets everywhere, doesn't it?
Yeah. Okay, we've got
Yeah, there's some more. Yeah, Kate's asking, can you say more about your interest in the theme of awe and wonder? Where did this interest originate from?
Oh gosh, I don't know, but I know that it's a human thing because I knew when I read Gombrich's Sense of Order, he talks about wonder, and immediately I it was one of those moments similar with the order and disorder that I realized that, oh, it's not just me, or I haven't just come up with this thing myself. This is a human thing to be interested in wonder. But I suppose there might be something to do with my personality that is more inclined towards it, and I would say maybe because I'm quite a curious person. I mean, I'm fairly risk averse, but if something, I will put myself in positions, difficult positions sometimes, if there's enough that's interesting me. Curiosity will make me do things that I sometimes think, oh, what did I do that for? Or why did I go there? Or why did I say that I would do that? And I think as well, yeah, I don't know. I think wonder I'd like to believe it's a very human thing. There's something, I think it's a very universal thing. And I think at the moment, especially, that's something that we need to give more attention to. That I think there's a lot of divisive conversation that happens at the moment because of social media, mainly. There could be all sorts of other reasons, but I blame a lot of it on social media. And actually, there's tons of things that we all have in common, no matter where we're from, or or what we believe, or what politics we have. And one of those things that is this sense of wonder. And if you think of something like a beautiful sunset, you might say that's really cheesy, but there's no way we could all go out there together and sit and watch a beautiful sunset and not be affected by that. And it's back to this embarrassing, like, oh, you're not meant to be led by your emotions. But I just think, well, that's being human. It's a lovely thing.
yeah, it feels like maybe that innate sense of awe or that searching for wonder is similar to your kind of inquiry into looking for a natural sense of order and how much disorder you can accommodate as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'll have a wonder at nature, and I will have a wonder at humans. Like I think I said to you previously, John, when we were chatting, this is why I just can't stop my love for photorealist painting. And all the criticisms it gets for, you could say, well, you can just take a photo, or you could even get a machine to do that nowadays, or I don't know what. And those artists, they're all just using tricks and I just think can't help looking at a photorealist painting and being just blown away that someone did that with their hand and a brush. I just think that's amazing. And it has its limitations, of course, but just yeah.
What Liz Dees has said, the jumble of Lego looks like an observational nightmare to render.
Yeah, it was because of the situation with lockdown, and I had time. I was so busy before they announced it, and then suddenly all this time that I didn't think I was going to have. I mean, I think that happened to a lot of people. You'd imagined your life for the next 3 months, and suddenly nothing, absolutely nothing was happening. And it's probably the first time I really was able to attempt to paint something a little bit more photographically than I usually would. And I have to say I did really enjoy it. And I used cheats, so that was like I'll project on maybe 3 different images of Lego and then draw around them, and then you know, the projector goes away and I then have to try and figure it out from the photograph, you know. But yeah, it's not if you look closely, you'll see that the some things are really big that should be small, and some things are smaller that should be big, but I don't know if it matters too much.
Okay, Helen says she really loves the drips contrasting with the sense of order, and she's also says, did you use inks when you were in China?
Yeah, I didn't use lots of different inks. I just bought some black ink, but that was enough for me to, I mean, it's like that, you have to limit yourself, you know, with my color problem, you have to limit yourself sometimes, because I'd never used inks before. So then it was a lot of, you know, it's better to just use one color sometimes so you can understand what's going on before you attempt to try something else. And since then I've used different colored inks together. But even with the, you know, with the black ink, it does the most beautiful things. And they've got such great papers there that should have brought more home with me, to be honest. Yeah, I'd recommend using inks to anybody if you've no idea what you're doing and you just want some inspiration. But it does make a difference what paper you use. I don't always think watercolor paper is the best. The best paper I've ever used inks with is this unsized Chinese paper, and I don't really. The only time I got it outside of China was in a shop in London. A lot of the Chinese calligraphy paper that you get, it's got a size on it. It doesn't blot in the way that, you know, the stuff that I used did. But
okay, we've got one more question.
Can I sneak a quick question in? Yeah, I noticed, Josie, you don't use figures, actual human figures in your work. That's kind of implied by the objects, but I wonder if that's a sort of deliberate decision.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I started talking about myself quite early on, and I can't tell you. I think it was one of those kind of feedback loops where I noticed that I wasn't doing it, and then I would say that I'm purposely, and then I would purposely not do it. But I think it happened more naturally. I used to relate it to this idea of you know, if you're trying to affect someone using subconscious, you know, like in sort of like maybe hypnosis or something, where you're trying to get someone on your side when you describe something, like if you're doing a sort of a meditation where it's guided or something. If you say things, if you tell someone about what's there, they're less likely to come with you on that journey, because they'll have some other idea in their head. So I always think it's better to be as kind of ambiguous as possible. You know, if you're going to say to someone, now go to your favorite place, they'll come up with their favorite place. If you then say to them, and walk to the waterfall, they'll be like, what? There was no waterfall in my favorite place. And I feel a little bit like that with the figures. As soon as you put a figure in, I feel like it's sort of saying something quite specific. Sort of a person has then entered that place, and then you can start counting those people and looking at what they are and what they're doing and the psychology of that person. And in a way, that's like too much for me. I feel like I want you to be the person, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you, that's great. Yes, so a final comment from Jackie, not really a question, but she says, when I was an Ofsted inspector, when the arts were valued, we used to ask the question, where's the awe and wonder? If it existed, it was always in the art or performance departments. I doubt they ask that question now in schools, so go on carrying the flag.
Oh, do you know what? I really like to hear that. I mean, I actually don't think one way is best and another way is best. But I feel like the option should be there, and I feel like you should not have to apologize for, you know, wanting to paint certain things or wanting to attract people in a certain way, and or being okay about I think there's a lot to be said for kind of finding you know, the theory behind work, and really drilling down into why people make a painting, or some paintings are made on the back of a lot of theory, and I think there's so much to be said for that, and I'm so interested when that happens. But I also think there's other times when that hasn't happened, and it's fine also, because you can love something just because of the way it looks. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to have very detailed references to all sorts of other things, you know, and detailed theory behind it. When I was in China, I went, there's an art, Xiamen, where I stayed, has an art school, and I was invited to, because the residency was affiliated with the university, Xiamen University, and I was invited to talk to the students about my work. And then also I asked if I could then come and see one of their classes. And there was a lot of difficulty on the campus, because there was a tutor. Oh, he's an amazing painter, and he was really pushing for the sort of more Western art school way of doing things, you know, where you don't teach skills as much, and you teach people to think in certain ways, or you get people to question things, or and it's a little bit more, I suppose that's the way things have become a little bit more in our art schools now. And I came to watch them doing their lesson. And so the art schools in China at the moment, I don't know if there's any others now, but then I was told that this was quite typical, that, you know, you wouldn't be majoring in it, because being an artist wasn't really a career. You'd be majoring in something else, and you'd be doing art, and you'd probably become a teacher, or, you know, so you'd be maybe learning to be a teacher instead. And the other side of it was then you were potentially learning more learning skills. So I came into life drawing class and watched everyone, and their skills, the students' skills, were unbelievable. And and I was just in awe of how they were able to paint technically in a way that, and I was just sad that I never got taught that, because I'd always been someone who felt that something was lost when the life rooms, you know, in many art schools, the life rooms disappeared. That lots of art schools, in maybe up until the 80s, certainly at Norwich School of Art, it was one of the last ones that still had a life room, where people, you would go in there every day and you would paint with John Wonnacott and John Lazur, these amazing painters. And that was one of the only ones left in the country at that time. And this doesn't happen at all now. It's partly because of space, you know, because they've got to pack the students in and that kind of thing, but there's other reasons for it. And at the time I researched this because I wrote my dissertation about it when I did my degree course, and I was just really sad that I never got that chance. And I'm still quite sad that chance isn't really available. But then there's so much I got from doing the type, you know, going back to my experience in China. That teacher, I said to him, "Oh, look at your students and look what they can do," and he was like, "Nah, this is not what we want." He wanted things to be more like the Western art schools, and I think maybe both is right. There must be a way to be able to deliver both, or different for different people. If you could go on a course to do one, or you could go on a course to do the other, or whatever you wanted, and for them not to be seen as one being better than the other, you know, there's something in between. But I don't know, maybe that's the future.
Yeah. Well, I think that's pretty much everybody's questions answered. So it might be a good time to wrap up there.
Yeah.
But thanks very much, Josie. That's been really interesting. Thanks for being our first Feral Fry Up of 2021. And if anyone wants to check out Josie's work in more depth, then you've got a website, haven't you, Josie? josiejenkins.co.uk.
Yeah, you can Google my name and I'll come up top anyway. Google my name.
And of course, you've got Instagram, which is Josie Jenkins, at Josie Jenkins Artist, isn't it?
What's that? Sorry again.
Your Instagram is.
Oh yeah. I think it's Instagram at Josie Jenkins Artist.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for having me.
Brilliant. Okay, well, no, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. So before everyone goes, I'd just like to say that Feral Art School, we're going to be having a tutors exhibition in the window space down Humber Street. So if any of you find yourselves on your daily constitutional, wandering or jogging even down Humber Street, from Friday, you'll be able to see some works exhibited in the window of one of the units down Humber Street, containing works by some of the Feral Art School tutors, and that'll be going on through the end most of January and probably into February as well. So just keep your eyes peeled for that. The next Feral Fry Up is going to be February the 11th. Yes. I think we said it's TBC who we're going to be talking to. But obviously, if you keep an eye on our website, on our Instagram, and if you're already signed up to the mailing list, you'll get a reminder about that and more information about who we're going to be talking to. So thanks to all of you for joining us. Happy New Year. Fingers crossed things will be a bit better for us all this year. But thanks again to Josie for giving us a really interesting talk and a perspective from a painter based at the opposite side of the country to most of us. And thank you all for joining us. So I'm going to close the meeting now. Josie, if you can just hang on, we'll have a bit of a chat.
Yeah, that's fine.
And,
Josie, I was going to say, I think it might chuck me off with everyone else if you close it, but okay. We'll reconvene after.
Okay, we'll see how that goes. So essentially, then, can all of the rest of you just leave, please?
You just make everyone else leave, yeah.
There's lots of good wishes, so we'll pass those on.
Oh, I'm just having a little look. There's such really nice comments. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice.